to the Rogue Trader podcast with me, Nick Leeson. Today I'm joined by Seth Freedman, an expert in the world of corporate intelligence, a journalist, an author, and an all-round good guy. We've got a few subjects to talk about today. The things that have probably attracted my attention in the markets. We've seen Crispin Odey, who's been fined over £1 million for his lack of integrity in the financial markets. Seth has some insight on that story. And then in general terms, we're just looking at the Financial Ombudsman, regulators in general. We both have some instances where we have to liaise with the Financial Ombudsman and some difficulties that we face there. And maybe I'll talk a little bit about some of the regulation that I saw during my own time at Barings in my meetings with the Serious Fraud Office, which I know is another subject that we can talk about. So Seth, if we start with Crispin Odey, you know this guy.
Yeah, I do. He actually contacted me when the story first broke of all these allegations of sexual assault and various other wrongdoings at his firm. He got in touch with me knowing that I'd worked on the Harvey Weinstein case and looked after various other sort of oligarchs and business figures. And he came to me and said, look, how can you help? I mean, I didn't do any of these things. And obviously I have to treat, like a lawyer does, anyone as innocent until proven guilty. So I talked to him, I heard his story. He's obviously been always painted as quite a sinister figure in the city, having made his money backing Brexit, basically, and just running a hedge fund, which in left-wing circles is looked down on just for existing, basically, which is nonsense. And it wasn't until later on that he said, I did commit one of the assaults that he denied, where I thought, look, I just can't be caught up in another Weinstein-style case where they're lying to the investigators and the lawyers and so on. And I ended up giving a recording of him talking to me to Bloomberg, and it formed part of the kind of ongoing story about him. However, at this point, he's all these people who said, oh, we're going to sue him, there's going to be police charges and so on. None of those things have happened. And it's almost trial by media with him. You've got the FCA saying, you know, we're going to ban him from financial services, fine him £1.8 million, but he's never been found guilty of anything. They've got a little loophole and said, oh, he's got a lack of integrity in how he hampered our investigations. Obviously, £1.8 million to the layman is a lot of money. To him, it's nothing. So it's not like it's means tested or anything. That really is a drop in the ocean to him. And it's another example of the FCA wanting to look good to a certain clique of journalists and activists and so on. But when it comes to the nuts and bolts, day-to-day stuff, the FCA don't crack down on directors who commit fraud or companies who rip off investors and so on. This is just an easy win for them. Oh, we find Crispin Odey, we banned him from financial services as though they're doing their job generally, which they're not, as you know and I know from other work we do.
It's funny when you talk about banned from financial services, and you know, we discussed this off air the other day. I don't think I've ever been banned. Does that mean my integrity is better than Crispin Odey's? I don't know, but I'm not sure. But no, I unless my lawyer at the time didn't tell me, I don't think. Now, I'd never get another job. I accept that. There's, you know, if I tried to get regulated doing something, it would be impossible. And I'm sure Crispin Odey maybe will find that going down the track. But yeah, no trial by jury. He's just been found guilty or a lack of integrity. And look, it always makes me laugh when you associate the word integrity with the financial markets. Yes, there's rules and regulations, but you're all trying to kill each other at the end of the day. There's only, you know, there's one winner, there's one loser, and it's just, you know, I don't know. Like I say, I didn't get banned. Maybe I should have been. Maybe I am. I don't even know. If anybody knows, you know, let us know, because I'm not sure. Not that I'm trying to get round it at any stage in the future, but it reminds me of the Serious Fraud Office, and I know you've got people, or you know people that have been involved with the Serious Fraud Office over the years as well. And you know, they came out to interview me for a week in Germany, and the only thing good about them was that they brought me a McDonald's a couple of days when they were asking me questions. So I went through it for that purpose. But they had a forensic accountant who I don't think could add two and two together. There were a couple of A couple of guys from the Met Police that were actually quite good and understood more than the forensic accountant. But the questions that they were asking me just, made it really, really clear that these guys didn't have a clue.
Yeah. No, and I think when you've got the SFO, when you've got the FCA, they've got a public face and they want to look like they're doing something. But too many times, it's too small for them to bother with because there's no big fine for the public purse to recoup. So if you've got banks who are accused of misdeeds, HSBC or Barclays or whoever, they can fine them hundreds of millions, if not billions. And that actually is money that goes back to the exchequer and it's worth their while doing. If you've got company directors who've ripped off investors to the tune of like 30 million, there's not going to be a fine. The public doesn't really care. It's too small to sort of attract attention. And that's really where investors are getting burnt and people are really losing out. But you can't rely on these regulators and the SFO to actually act on their mandate, basically. And then you've got next week, Tom Hayes and his co-defendant, who were jailed for rigging LIBOR. Their case is at the Supreme Court next week. And as has been seen throughout this sort of gargantuan and long trial that's gone all the way up to the Supreme Court now, the SFO don't come out of it looking good. It's not like the SFO have got a cast iron case against him. If anything, it looks like a witch hunt, and that's why the Supreme Court said, yeah, we will hear it again, and all eyes are going to be on that. But again, is it political, the reason that they got jailed, or is it really about law? I mean, my closeness to it tells me it's not about the law, but we'll see if the Supreme Court can finally sort of overturn that, what seems like a massive miscarriage of justice there.
Yeah, I mean, you're far closer to the case than I, but potentially that will cost hundreds of millions.
Yeah, I mean, it will for wrongful imprisonment, and then you've got the claims against the banks that they were working for, who effectively sent them up as sacrificial lambs. Instead of having to pay billions in fines, they might pay 100 million in, wrongful dismissal and denying them earnings down the line. But
yeah, I've met a couple of the guys that have been acquitted, right? And I meet them on the speaker circuit from time to time, and I know one or two of them that have gone on to work in other businesses as well, and it ruined their lives. And like I suppose looking at it, slightly holistically, my life was ruined because that was right. What I did was wrong, and there should have been better controls and systems in place. But if there's been a miscarriage of justice, then something needs to be done. And hopefully we'll see what the outcome of that is next week, and maybe Tom and yourself could do a piece, shortly afterwards. Just onto the last piece before we finish up, the ombudsman. You and I have various different dealings with the Financial Ombudsman. I mean, one of the things that I've certainly been seeing over the last little while is that they're trying to investigate the cases, and it's not their job. They've got a rule on whether or not the financial institution that we complained about did enough to protect the individual or the company that is involved in that particular episode. And we have one case. You're very aware of the case. We're almost having to prove that he was scammed. Whereas the bank have never questioned whether he was scammed, but now the Financial Ombudsman are asking for all the details around it. And just in the current context of the, Labour looking at all the regulators, seeing whether we need so many of them. I have my own views on the regulators. I always think they're behind the curve, but are we going to see significant changes in that regard, Seth?
I think Labour are clueless when it comes to financial markets, always have been, always will be, just by virtue of the kind of people that they attract to the cabinet and put in positions of power. It's not to say the Tories are any better, but at least often they come from a business background. But this whole pandering to business and saying we want to deregulate in order to open up markets and attract investment and ultimately reduce borrowing costs, don't go for the Ombudsman. I mean, the Ombudsman's the last line of defence when it comes to, like you say, banks who won't admit that they let a scam go on under their noses, spread betting firms that misclassify clients against ESMA and MiFID regulation. I mean, the Ombudsman is who is there to serve and protect. And now you've got Labour saying, and the Treasury saying we're going to review it because maybe it's not doing what it's meant to do. And the best line from the lobbying side was, we don't like the fact that the ombudsman's judging based on fairness rather than on it's like, well, I would quite like a based on fairness. I don't know what else you want.
It's all we want, isn't it? It's a fair decision.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, I mean, cases that we've worked on, we definitely, can open up and show the machinations, and really, you need that ombudsman with as much power as it can have. So
yeah, and I think we'll probably do that over the next couple of weeks, because what is really distasteful is the victim blaming that goes on from the banks. It's not, maybe we did something wrong, or maybe we could have done something better. And we're talking sometimes about 7-figure sums that these guys have lost, and they're vulnerable people. Yet the first line of defence from the bank is to blame the victim. And the ombudsman, in some of the responses that we've seen, is close to accepting that.
And interestingly, bringing it back to the Crispin Odey thing, you wouldn't dare do that when it was an accusation of sexual assault. You start saying, oh, the woman's wearing a short skirt, or asking for it. I mean, that is completely unacceptable. But here, when a victim gets scammed and you've got the bank saying, well, maybe you should have done something different. It's like you got one rule when it comes to one type of allegation, and another when they're all victims, basically. And their lives do get ruined. And
that's what we're looking for, a bit of redress, I suppose. So Seth, just to finish off, a little bit about corporate intelligence, the sort of stuff you're looking or you see that's going on at the moment that you're involved with.
We shouldn't have to exist when it comes to, like, quote, cleaning up the city. I mean, I said to the Times a few years ago, we are a kind of paramilitary FCA. We're the private security that only the rich can afford, unfortunately, or when people group together to hire us. But we're doing the job the FCA, the SFO, all of them should be doing, which is out there policing the smaller markets, the medium markets, not just the FTSE 100. I mean, we even work for FTSE 100 companies, helping them out when they've got litigation and need our human intelligence and so on. But it's scandalous that only those with money can afford us to come in and fill the void left by the regulators, basically.
Yeah, the regulators, they focus on one or two big cases. They're not looking after people in general. To be fair to them, there's not enough of them, but that doesn't really excuse them, does it?
They're underfunded, like the police, like the NHS, and so on. But even in your case, you're the fall guy. Look, you admit it, you did it. But what about up the chain? Why can't they say, oh, when the compliance was non-existent, or the management would turn a blind eye? They don't want to go for the big political targets, basically, the ones who, the clubbable ones who they're out and are in positions of power. So, like in Tom Hayes' case, he's a fall guy, but no one up the chain was guilty of anything or even reprimanded. So.
All right. Well, look, what we'll probably do is we'll jump on again next week and see how that case has gone with Tom. And I'm going to have to up my sartorial game for next week. A very plain blue t-shirt and all of that going on over there.
See what I can get at Oxfam for the next one.
All right. Thanks a lot, Seth. Take care, mate.
It's it. Bye.
Cheers.